I knew something was off the second I saw the blinds in my living room swaying from outside. I was just getting back from a long graveyard shift at the hospital. My name's Mason Carter, nurse of 15 years, homeowner for 3, and apparently the newest target of the Maple Ridge HOA's resident lunatic Beverly. Yeah, that's her real name. Beverly Dandridge, HOA president, self-appointed property police, and full-time pain in the rear. I parked my truck, grabbed my coffee-stained thermos, and walked up the driveway. That's when I noticed the front door was slightly open. Now, I'm not the paranoid type. I've done trauma shifts. I've seen what happens when you panic before thinking. So I set my thermos down gently on the porch rail, reached inside the flower pot for my backup house key still there, and slowly pushed the door open. Hello? I called into my own house, heart starting to pick up steam. Then I heard it. A voice. High-pitched. Complaining. No one needs this many packages on their porch. It's a mess. It reflects badly on the entire neighborhood. I stepped inside, and there she was, Beverly. 60-something, strawberry blonde hair in a tight bun, clutching her little beige clipboard like it was a weapon. Wearing a pastel pink tracksuit and latex gloves, standing in my living room like she paid the mortgage. She didn't even flinch when she saw me. "Oh, Mason," she said, like we were old friends. "I was just doing a welfare check. You've had boxes sitting out for 2 days. It's unsightly." I blinked. "You broke into my house." "I didn't break in," she sniffed. "The door was unlocked." "It was not," I said, stepping fully inside and shutting it behind me. "You forced it open." "I locked it this morning." She waved a hand like my words were beneath her. "The HOA has the authority to ensure properties are maintained properly. The bylaws state—" "No, it doesn't," I cut in. "Beverly, you broke into my home. That's a felony." She huffed. "Don't be dramatic. You left packages sitting out, and that creates a theft risk. I was protecting neighborhood interests." I looked down at the boxes near the door. A couple of Amazon deliveries I hadn't had time to bring in. One of them was still sealed. The other was open, and she'd clearly gone through it. My new blood pressure cuff and a set of compression socks were half out of the packaging. "You went through my mail," I said. "I had to make sure it wasn't hazardous." I laughed once, loud and disbelieving. "You're insane." "I'm thorough," she corrected, nose in the air. "You should be thanking me." I pulled out my phone. "You've got 5 seconds to get out of my house before I call the cops." "You wouldn't dare," she said, eyebrows rising. "The HOA board will back me up. We've had complaints about your yard, your truck, your trash bins. You're on our radar." I tapped the emergency dial. "Then they can visit you in jail." She scoffed. "I'll leave when I'm finished documenting," the 911 operator answered, and I didn't wait. "This is Mason Carter. I need police at my home right away. A woman broke in while I was gone. She's here, and she's refusing to leave." Beverly's face finally started to shift. Not full fear, not yet, but definitely caution. She straightened her clipboard. "I'll leave now. This is unnecessary." I shook my head. Too late. She tried to brush past me, but I stepped in front of the door. "You're waiting. You don't get to break into someone's home and walk out like nothing happened." "Mason, be reasonable," she hissed. "This will make things very difficult for you with the board." I chuckled. "Lady, I work trauma. You think I'm scared of a couple of retirees with too much time in a Facebook group?" To her credit, she didn't try to run. She just stood there, arms crossed, tapping her foot like she was waiting for an Uber. 10 minutes later, the cops showed up, 2 officers, young but serious. I explained everything. Beverly tried to cut in, but she didn't get far. "She broke in," I said. "I have her on my Ring cam, kicking the door in. She went through my packages. Claimed she was doing an inspection." "You have video footage?" the male officer asked. "Absolutely," I said, already pulling it up. They watched the clip, Beverly, clipboard in hand, looking around like a cartoon villain, then planting her foot and kicking the door hard enough to pop it open. Her face turned a shade of red I hadn't seen before. "This is completely out of context," she started. The officers didn't care. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for unlawful entry and tampering with mail," the woman officer said. "You can't be serious." They were. She was cuffed right there in my foyer, still protesting, muttering about bylaws and community standards. As they walked her out, she looked over her shoulder at me. "This isn't over, Mason." I leaned against the doorframe. "Sure it is, Beverly. It's over the second those cuffs clicked." After they drove off, I shut the door, locked it again, and finally exhaled. I thought that'd be the end of it. I was wrong. The next morning, I woke up to a violation notice taped to my front door. Apparently, calling law enforcement to the property without board notification was now considered a disruption of community peace and grounds for a fine. That's when I knew Beverly wasn't working alone. This HOA was rotten from the inside out, and I'd just kicked the hornet's nest. By sunrise the next morning, I was sitting at my kitchen table, trying to process the new HOA notice while sipping reheated coffee that tasted like burnt rubber. The paper was printed in all caps, stapled sloppily, and full of legal-sounding gibberish that didn't hold up under even casual scrutiny. It claimed that unauthorized involvement of law enforcement disrupted the peaceful image of the community, and thus I owed the HOA $250. I let out a dry laugh and set the paper aside. They were doubling down. Not just Beverly, but the rest of the board too. That meant this wasn't just the act of one overzealous retiree. It was a coordinated effort to keep people quiet, compliant, and intimidated. And I'd just become the guy who told them no. I pulled up the HOA bylaws on my laptop, yes. I still had the original PDF from Move and Day and combed through every section. Nowhere did it mention anything about notifying the board before calling the police. In fact, the word law enforcement didn't appear at all. So either they were bluffing, or they created their own version of the rules. I shut the laptop, grabbed my phone, and made a call. Clint, it's Mason. You still work with the city attorney's office. Clint was an old friend from high school. We'd gone separate ways, him into municipal law, me into nursing, but we still caught a game now and then. The man had a memory like a steel trap and a vendetta against HOA overreach ever since his mom had been fined for planting marigolds. You're calling about Maple Ridge? He asked immediately. You're not the first. That made me sit up. What do you mean? 3 other homeowners have contacted the office in the past year. All complaints about harassment, bogus fines, and procedural violations. But none of them followed through. Scared off, I think. They're issuing fines for calling the cops. Clint let out a breath. That's not just illegal, it's unconstitutional. They can't penalize you for exercising a basic right. I figured. Beverly broke into my house yesterday. I had her arrested. Now this is their retaliation. There was a pause on the line. She actually went inside, kicked the door open and everything. Went through my mail, too. I've got it all on camera. Holy hell. Mason, you need to file a formal complaint. I can help, but you've got to go on record. That way, if they try to retaliate again, there's a paper trail. I'm already in it, I said. Let's do it. By noon, I'd filed the complaint with the city's Department of Community Oversight. Clint walked me through the process and flagged it for priority handling. Apparently, Maple Ridge had already drawn attention for irregular governance behavior, and my case was just gasoline on the fire. I didn't hear anything that night, but the next morning, things escalated again. I stepped outside to find my truck missing. Gone. Not towed. Not parked nearby. Just gone. I stood there, stunned, staring at the empty driveway as a neighbor across the street peeked through her curtains and quickly vanished. I called the police again and reported it stolen. An officer arrived within the hour. As I explained what happened, he checked his tablet and frowned. Your truck was impounded, he said. Tow report says it was requested by your HOA for violation of vehicle appearance standards. I stared at him. That's not legal. They have no authority to tow from private driveways. He nodded. Normally, no. But the report says it was authorized by a temporary emergency clause in their bylaws. That was new. I drove down to the impound lot in a rideshare, paid the ridiculous fee, and got my truck back. It had a bright orange sticker on the windshield with the HOA logo on it. They'd actually printed their own decals. Back home, I opened the mailbox and found another violation notice, this time citing unauthorized vehicle storage. They were trying to bury me in fines and paperwork, but they didn't know who they were messing with. I installed 2 more security cameras, one facing the driveway, another covering the alley behind the house. I also started a document folder, saving every notice, every photo, every call log. If they wanted a war of documentation, I'd fight fire with fire. That evening, I knocked on my neighbor's door. Stanley, retired Air Force mechanic, lived 2 houses down and kept to himself mostly. He answered with a wary look. Stanley, I'm not here to sell anything, I said, but I think we've got a problem. Is this about the HOA? He asked, voice low. Yeah, they had my truck towed. Claimed it was an emergency. He stepped aside and waved me in. Same thing happened to me last winter, he said once we were inside. They towed my camper. Said it was unsightly, even though it was parked behind a fence. I fought it, but they threatened to place a lien on my house. They can't do that without court approval. They said otherwise. I didn't know any better. I nodded slowly. What if I told you I've got a contact in the city attorney's office who's building a case? Stanley's eyes narrowed. You serious? Dead serious. He leaned back in his chair. Then I've got emails, letters, and a recording of one of their meetings where Beverly told the board it was better to intimidate early than apologize later. My eyebrows went up. You kept that. I keep everything, he said. Military habit. By the end of the week, I'd spoken to 5 other neighbors. Each had a story. Fines for non-existent violations. Threats of legal action. One woman, a widowed schoolteacher, said they tried to ban her from having her grandson's tricycle in the front yard. And each of them had saved something. Letters. Photos. Even voicemail messages from Beverly herself, recorded in that same chirpy, infuriating tone she'd used in my living room. We compiled everything. Clint helped me submit an official petition to the city to audit the HOA's operations. Once the documents were filed, we announced a neighborhood meeting open to all residents to be held at the local library's community room. That's when the real retaliation began. Flyers appeared overnight, taped to lampposts and stuffed into mailboxes. They accused me of sabotaging community harmony and spreading falsehoods to incite division. Someone even hacked my Wi-Fi and changed the network name to HOA Trader. I didn't react. I just kept collecting. The night of the meeting, more than 30 residents showed up. Some nervous, some angry, all tired of being pushed around. Clint presented the timeline, the violations of city code, the misuse of authority. When he finished, silence hung in the room until Stanley stood and said, "They've been bullying us for years. I say we vote to remove the entire board." Applause broke out. Not everyone clapped, but enough did. That's when the door opened and Beverly walked in. She looked like she'd aged a decade in a week. No clipboard this time. Just a manila folder clutched to her chest like a life vest. "I demand to speak," she said. Clint raised an eyebrow. "You're not on the agenda. This entire thing is an illegal assembly," she snapped. "The HOA charter requires 2 weeks' notice for any meeting." Clint stepped forward. "This isn't an HOA meeting. It's a public forum, and your board is under investigation." Her face twitched. "You people don't understand what it takes to run a community. Order. Standards. Without us, this place would rot." A woman in the back, a young mom with twins, stood up. "You mean without you breaking into homes and towing trucks?" Murmurs spread. Beverly looked like she wanted to crawl out of her own skin. Clint cleared his throat. "Ms. Dandridge, I should inform you that your actions, specifically the unauthorized towing and unlawful entry, have triggered a criminal inquiry. You'll be contacted by the city's legal department within the week." She stared at him, then at me. "You did this." "No," I said. "You did." She turned and stormed out. I didn't see her again for days. But 2 mornings later, a city vehicle pulled up to the HOA's office, a converted garage behind Beverly's house. 2 plainclothes investigators went inside. 20 minutes later, they emerged with boxes of documents and a desktop computer. Beverly was arrested that afternoon. This time, it wasn't just for trespassing. It was wire fraud, misappropriation of funds, and falsifying municipal records. And that was just the start. 36 hours after Beverly's arrest, a second letter arrived at my door, this one with a city seal embossed at the top. It wasn't a violation notice. It was a formal request from the Department of Community Oversight, asking me to testify at an upcoming administrative hearing regarding Maple Ridge HOA's operations. The investigation had picked up momentum fast. Whatever they'd found in that garage office must have been serious. I tucked the letter in my file folder, next to the growing stack of documentation. My kitchen table had become a makeshift war room, covered in notes, printed emails, and flash drives. I'd even cleared out a drawer just to store neighbor testimonies, handwritten statements, screenshots of threatening messages, and dozens of photos of citation slips left on windshields and windowsills like passive-aggressive confetti. It was clear now, Beverly hadn't just been power-hungry. She'd orchestrated something deeper, something systemic. And the worst part? The rest of the board either helped or kept quiet. Later that afternoon, I drove down to the city building to deliver additional evidence. Clint met me on the front steps, wearing a rumpled button-up and holding a manila envelope. "You're not gonna believe this," he said, motioning me toward the parking lot. They weren't just issuing fake fines. They were laundering the payments. How? I asked, following him to his car. There's a shell account under the name Maple Ridge Grounds Improvement Fund. Problem is, it's not registered anywhere. Residents were writing checks to it thinking it was part of the HOA's landscaping budget. And it wasn't? Nope. It was a private bank account, opened by Beverly and a man named Howard Kellner. I stopped short. Howard? That guy on the board with the massive mustache? That's him. He listed himself as operations consultant for the fund. We traced almost $70,000 through that account in the last 18 months. That's felony territory. Clint nodded. And it gets worse. One of the payments was flagged by the bank for containing a forged signature. That triggered a fraud alert. So that's why the investigation accelerated? Exactly. The bank reported it to the State Financial Crimes Unit. When your complaint landed on their desk the same week, the city fast-tracked everything. I leaned against the hood of his car, trying to wrap my head around it. They were stealing from the neighborhood, then using fake violations to keep the money flowing, and using intimidation to silence anyone who asked questions. I looked over at him. What happens now? We push for dissolution. If the board is found to have violated municipal code and state law, the HOA can be dismantled. The community can vote to replace it with a new resident association, one with actual transparency. My phone buzzed. It was Stanley. I answered, and his voice came through tense. 2 men just came to my door. Said they were with the HOA's legal subcommittee. Tried to pressure me into withdrawing my statement. What did you do? I told them to leave. One of them tried to film me. I want to file a restraining order. You'll get one, I said. We're not backing down. By the end of the week, 3 more neighbors reported similar visits. The HOA was scrambling, sending out whatever loyalists they had left to try and salvage their crumbling authority. But it was too late. The city had already subpoenaed their financial records, and Clint confirmed that 2 of the board members had lawyered up. Then came the raid. It happened early Saturday morning. I was walking my dog when I saw 2 black sedans pull up to Beverly's house. A team of plainclothes agents stepped out, followed by a pair of uniformed officers. They approached the front door calmly, knocked, and after a few minutes, went inside. A few neighbors gathered on the sidewalk, whispering. No one got close. They emerged an hour later, carrying several clear bins filled with binders, laptops, and external hard drives. Beverly wasn't in the house. She was still being held without bail, but the agents had a search warrant linked to the bank account fraud. Apparently, she'd been keeping backup records at home. That night, I got a call from a woman named Lacey, mid-30s, worked in real estate, and had only moved into the neighborhood 6 months ago. She'd never interacted with the HOA beyond paying the quarterly dues. But after hearing about the investigation, she'd gone through her receipts and found something strange. They double-charged me, she said. 2 payments, same day, same amount. One went to the regular HOA account. The other went to that grounds fund. Did you authorize the second payment? No. And the memo line on the check was changed. I wrote Q3 dues, but the copy I got back says landscape surcharge. Do you still have the original check stub? Yeah. And I'm bringing it to the city attorney on Monday. I hung up and added her name to the witness list. At this point, the neighborhood was split. About half the residents had turned fully against the HOA, attending our meetings, sharing stories, and preparing to vote for its dissolution. The other half either didn't believe what was happening or were too scared to get involved. A few diehards even doubled down, posting signs in their yards that read "Support Order, Support the Board." The next development came from an unexpected source, a former board secretary named Eileen. She'd resigned quietly a year ago, citing personal differences, but never said why. After the raid, she reached out. I kept copies, she said, handing me a flash drive at a diner 2 towns over. They thought I deleted everything when I stepped down. I didn't. I plugged the drive into my laptop and opened the folder labeled meeting tapes. There were dozens of audio files, some poor quality, others crystal clear. I clicked on one dated 8 months ago, labeled March Strategy. Voices filled the speakers. Beverly, unmistakable. We need more revenue. Start citing fence heights. Everyone's got a non-compliant fence. Then Howard. We'll need to stagger them. Can't hit everyone at once, or they'll get suspicious. Another voice. What about the new guy? The nurse. He works nights. He won't notice. I paused the recording. They'd been targeting me from the start. I slid the laptop toward Clint, who listened silently. When the recording ended, he exhaled slowly. This proves premeditated fraud. They weren't just negligent, they were conspiring. 3 days later, the administrative hearing began. It wasn't a trial, but it felt close. The city had convened a panel of 3 officials, and each side was allowed to present testimony, evidence, and witnesses. Clint and I sat at a long table with Stanley, Lacey, and Eileen. Across from us sat the remaining board members minus Beverly and Howard, who were now facing felony charges. Their attorney tried to downplay everything, claiming the violations were clerical errors and that the grounds fund was simply mismanaged. Then Clint played the audio. The room went silent. When it ended, one of the panelists asked, "Was this recording verified?" "I've already submitted the metadata," Clint replied. "It's authentic." The board attorney didn't speak again. After 3 hours of testimony, the panel announced their preliminary decision. The HOA was found to be in violation of municipal code, state nonprofit regulations, and federal financial reporting laws. A vote to dissolve the board would be scheduled within 30 days. In the meantime, a temporary oversight committee would be appointed by the city to manage community affairs. We walked out into the parking lot as relief washed over me like a wave. Stanley clapped me on the back. "We actually did it." "No," I said. "We started it." The next few weeks would be critical. The vote hadn't happened yet, and some of the board's die-hard supporters were already trying to stir confusion online, claiming the recordings were fake and accusing us of sabotaging community unity. But now, we had truth, and truth doesn't need a megaphone. It just needs persistence. As I drove home, I passed Beverly's house. The blinds were drawn, the yard overgrown. A "for sale" sign had been jammed into the lawn, crooked and sun-faded. Poetic in a way. The woman who'd tried to control every blade of grass in the neighborhood couldn't even keep her own hedges trimmed now. And for the first time in weeks, I pulled into my driveway without checking over my shoulder. The neighborhood vote was scheduled for a Thursday evening, held at the local middle school auditorium since the library's community room couldn't accommodate the growing crowd. I arrived early, wearing the same navy polo I wore during hospital inspections. Something about it made me feel steady. Clint was waiting near the entrance, scanning the parking lot with sharp eyes. "They're bussing in allies," he muttered as I approached. "Not residents. Friends of board members, trying to stuff the vote. Illegitimate ballots. Not if they can convince people they're household representatives. We're going to need ID checks." The city's temporary oversight committee had anticipated this and brought in 2 municipal clerks to verify residency. Every voter had to show a driver's license with a Maple Ridge address, and only 1 vote per property was allowed. Still, it created a bottleneck, and tension seeped into the crowd like humidity. Inside, the auditorium buzzed with low voices and shifting bodies. I spotted Stanley near the front, sitting beside Eileen. Lacey stood near the back, arms folded, her eyes locked on 2 men in collared shirts who had tried to intimidate her weeks earlier. She didn't flinch. The moderator, a quiet man from the city's mediation board, stepped up to the podium and tapped the mic. "We'll begin in 5 minutes. Ballots will be distributed row by row. Please remain seated until your section is called." I took a seat in the 3rd row, feeling the weight of months pressing down. All the evidence, the meetings, the testimonies, it came down to this. Dissolution of the HOA required a 2/3 majority. If we didn't reach it, the surviving board members could regain control. The moderator started the process, calling names, checking addresses, handing out slips of paper with a simple choice: maintain current HOA governance, or dissolve HOA and establish interim resident committee. It took nearly an hour to cycle through the entire room. Clint leaned toward me once the last ballots were collected. They tried to sneak in at least 20 outside votes. Most got caught. A few slipped through. Will it be enough to swing it? We'll know in a minute. The moderator returned to the podium, holding a sealed envelope. He cleared his throat. Final vote count: 193 ballots cast. 130 voted to dissolve. 63 voted to maintain. Required threshold for dissolution was 129. Motion passes. There was a pause, half a second where no one moved, and then the room erupted. Applause bounced off the auditorium walls like thunder. Some people stood, others hugged. I saw Stanley shake hands with a young father I didn't know. Lacey gave a single nod, then left before the noise could swallow her. Clint turned to me, voice low. We just wiped an illegal regime off the map. You think they'll try to challenge it? They can try. But with pending charges, Beverly and Howard won't be touching a ballot or budget for the rest of their lives. 3 days later, I got a call from Detective Arana, the lead investigator attached to Beverly's fraud case. Her voice was brisk, but not unfriendly. We recovered 2 additional devices during the search, she said. One was a tablet registered under a fake name. It had encrypted messages several between Beverly and a man named Vincent Rollman. Never heard of him. You wouldn't have. He's not on the HOA board. He's a contractor. Landscaping and maintenance. The messages show Beverly approved inflated invoices $10,000 for non-existent tree work, $8,000 for fence repairs that never happened. The payments went through the shell account. Rollman kicked back a percentage. So he was laundering for her. Exactly. We've issued a warrant. He skipped town, but his office was raided this morning. We're coordinating with state authorities. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Is it enough to take the case federal? We're building toward it. The moment interstate wire transfers are confirmed, it's out of local hands. She paused, then added, You've done this community a favor, Mr. Carter. Most people ignore this kind of corruption because it's wrapped in paperwork. You peeled it back. I didn't have much to say to that. Just thanked her and hung up. The interim committee met that weekend. I wasn't on it. I didn't want the job, but I attended as a resident. Stanley had joined, as had Eileen and a woman named Dr. Priya Malhotra, a pediatrician who'd moved in last year. They discussed replacing the management company, establishing transparent budgeting protocols, and holding quarterly town halls. Someone asked if we'd be keeping the HOA name. We're not keeping anything from them, Dr. Malhotra said. We'll refile as the Maple Ridge Neighborhood Association. No enforcement power. Just community support. A quiet cheer spread through the room. No one shouted. It wasn't celebration, it was relief. That night, I walked my street for the first time in weeks without scanning every porch. Even the air felt different. The signs supporting the board had disappeared. The house across the street had a new bird feeder hanging from the mailbox. Someone had chalked, "Thank you, Mason," on the sidewalk outside my driveway. I didn't need the thanks. I just wanted the peace. A week later, Beverly's court date was set. She was indicted on 16 counts, including fraud, falsification of records, and conspiracy to defraud a homeowners association. Howard took a plea deal, agreeing to testify in exchange for reduced sentencing. Rollman was picked up in Nevada and charged with wire fraud and money laundering. Clint called me just after the indictment went public. You're officially a named witness, he said. You'll be subpoenaed, but it'll likely be months before trial. I'll be ready. You've changed the game, Mason. This case is already being used by other neighborhoods as precedent. I didn't think about that much. I wasn't interested in becoming a symbol, but it was good to know the damage wouldn't be swept under a rug. The next time I saw Beverly was on the news. A grainy courtroom sketch showed her slumped in a chair, expression unreadable, hands folded in her lap. No clipboard, no pastel tracksuit, just a gray blazer and the weight of consequences. The anchor read the charges aloud. I turned off the TV. The neighborhood moved on. Slowly, people rebuilt fences, painted over old HOA warning signs, and planted flowers without logging them in a spreadsheet. I saw kids biking again. The woman who'd been fined for her grandson's tricycle painted it bright yellow and left it right on her lawn. No one complained. One morning, a small envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of notepaper, handwritten in looping cursive. You were right to stand up. We were scared. Thank you for not being. That was it. I threw it out, not because it didn't matter, but because I didn't want to hold on to it. I'd done what needed to be done, and that was enough. A few weeks later, the new association held a potluck at the community park. No sign-in sheets, no dress codes, no clipboard patrols. I brought deviled eggs. Stanley made ribs. Kids ran wild. Dr. Malhotra's toddler tried to feed a hot dog to a squirrel. Someone tapped me on the shoulder. You going to run for the permanent committee? I shook my head. No, I said. I think I've done my tour. They laughed and moved on. I stood under the shade of a sycamore and watched my neighborhood become a community again. No bylaws. No threats. No fake fines. Just people. Exactly how it should have been all along.